Good morning, everyone. I guess I can be heard because I see hands. So it's good to see everyone. In that gata, there's that word realize again. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning. And various of us together have talked about that. It's a key word, realize. Realize what is right there. Realize what is so. Realize the true nature of things. Very different than attaining or grabbing or grasping or achieving or accomplishing or retaining or holding on to. Realize it. Realize it. Right? Make it real. See that it's real. Anyway, it just caught my attention. I want to thank Lori. We have a couple of new people on this morning, and I asked her to just coach us through Ken Hen, so that's why the instruction was given as we went. And good job, Lori. I have to at least. Where'd she go? There you are, Julie. Julie, Julie or Julia? I mean, I know you as Julie. Okay, both. Up in my upper left-hand corner, anyway, Julia Kirker. I've got a couple of things came across the wire. First, thank you for joining as a member, and we really appreciate the support. And then Julie showed up for introduction this morning, and this is no ordinary introduction. In fact, the introduction kind of ran a little short because Julie and I have known each other for, I think, 40 years, 39 or 40 years, back from University of Washington. And so for her name and her being to show up here is really pretty special. I was there at the attempted or the home birth of Julie and Neil's first child, Sarah, and with a midwife in Seattle, and was not that great of a godfather to Sarah just because of absence and distance and. I guess, I could put the word shortcoming on it, from my side, but, things are what they are. But anyway, Julie and I go back a long ways in a very sweet and intimate fashion. So I just wanted to welcome you and introduce you to the gang here, And then Connie Barnett there on the screen, welcome. If I know you and my, 62-year-old mind is just not grasping that fact, then my apologies, but welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Great. And thank you for joining us, Tamla. Everybody, really great to see everybody. I got back from the mountain, Yokoji Zen Mountain Center last night, and time for Lori and I to have dinner. And as you know, I'm doing a lot of going back and forth right now, but things are well up there. We had rain, it was amazing. We had rain, and Galen showed up and painted a deck and lent a hand for a day. So it was great to see you up there, Galen. One other note, Connie and Julie and anybody else that needs reminding, although there's that ominous, this meeting is being recorded at the beginning. We have made sure that my portion of the talk is posted in video format, but yours is not, so you should feel free and confident to share or say whatever you want. We may switch to just podcast in the future, and then we'll check in with you on that when you're not identified, because our discussions are so rich. I think that the discussion following the Dharma talk is usually better than the Dharma talk. So it feels a little weird to me to here's Shiro and the talk, and but what happened to all that other wisdom from all the other teachers here on Zoom. Lot going on. I know some of us have dear friends in the hospital. Brenda shared with us last week, some tragic news from her circle of close friends. And Brenda, I hope you were able to spend time with Ava. And then, of course, we have COVID-19 and Delta variants and the Mu variant and Lambda variant and hitting different states at different rates. And, there's a lot of challenge to the system. A lot of illness going on, a lot of sickness, old age sickness and death, which of course, Buddha, the historical Buddha, some 2,500 years ago, tossed aside his life of privilege and a child and a wife. You got to wonder about that. But it left the royalty and to answer that question: what is all this old age and death, and is there an end to this suffering? My mother passed away a month ago, and we talked about how do you be the end of suffering, and how do we hold people, and I thought I would share a koan from the Book of Equanimity and continue that conversation a little bit further in the hopes that it could be helpful to some or all of us. I think it's relevant in some way to all of us. It's case 94 in the Book of Equanimity, and it's called Tozan's Illness. The preface to the assembly says, "The inferior do not criticize the superior. The mean don't move the noble. Although one has self-control and follows others, one cannot burden the heavy by means of the light. When the four elements are maladjusted, how does one attend and nurture?" I like that last sentence in particular. How does one attend and nurture? What is our role in all this, challenge around us, and in particular with some of the illness that I know that some of us are dealing with. The main case: attention. Tozan was ill. A monk asked, "Osho, you're sick. Is there someone not sick?" Tozan answered, "Yes, there is." The monk asked, "Does the one who is not sick look after you?" Tozan replied, "This old monk is able to look after others." The monk asked, "Osho, how about when you look after others?" Tozan said, "Then the having of sickness is not seen." Really, really beautiful. "How about when you look after others?" Tozan said. "Then the having of sickness is not seen." The appreciatory verse, "Sloughing off a stinking skin bag, churning a red heap of flesh, before you the nose is straight, right now the skull is dried. The old doctor doesn't see previous ailments, the little ones seen, but it's difficult to approach. When the field's water drains, autumn's wet recedes. When the white clouds dissipate, the old mountain is chilled. Stop and eradicate, don't deceive and cheat. Using non-accomplishment inexhaustively, he gains the rank. Exalted treetop, you're not in the same class." So a lot going on here, but I want to try to keep it somewhat simple and grounded, as this simple guy always likes to do, because, if these ancient cases, if the Dharma doesn't resonate in today's language, in today's life, in our reality, then it dies. So how do we bring it to life? In this koan, Tozan was ill, and historically, if you look at this, Tozan, he is the toe of the Soto school of Zen, by the way, was on his deathbed. So he's not just ill, but like really ill. And along comes this monk with a Zen question, Osho, you're sick. Is there someone not sick? So here we go with the Zen games, I mean, and in some ways, this great master Tozan could have just like said, get out of my face, get out of my room, like I'm old, I've had enough of this, I'm near death, don't play Zen games with me. But part of the Zen game is always being there, right? Part of the commitment we take as students, practitioners of Zen is to be present, to always be there. So here again, we have another master on his deathbed, and instead of saying, get out of my face, which he certainly has every right to do, he engages. And he says, yes, there is. Is there someone not sick? Tozan answered, yes, there is. So, what's going on here? And now we have the dance of the relative and the absolute, the phenomenal and the empty going on, right? Because I'm sick, she's sick, he's sick, I mean, you're coughing or you're not coughing. You have a fever or you don't have a fever. You're on your deathbed or you're not. So there is that element of, there's someone sick and, here it is right now, sick. In that empty space where we drop concept and words and language and conceptual thinking, what is sickness but another label that we put on the experience of right now? And, this label sickness in our usual use of it, it has a pejorative sense to it. Like sickness should not be, right? Sickness is something other than wellness. Sickness is something that I should not be. Sickness is something that they should not be. It reminds me a little bit, there's a great book on water management and water drought called The Big Thirst. And one of the principal concepts that the author puts forth in that book is that this notion of drought is actually a dangerous notion. It's a dangerous terminology because it puts our current water situation in the context of not normal, like as an aberration, rather than this is what we've got, this is the water we've got, now what do we do? Another example, and I'll keep it short because a lot of you have heard it before, but was when our son Nick came out as gay, and I was like, well, how did you know, when did you know that you were gay? And he's like, I don't know, Dad, how did you know, when did you know you were straight? Right? And I, even with my liberal politics and mindset, had put a thing on that, like you had to discover the difference. You had to discover the otherness. And with his single slash of Manjushri sword, I don't know, Dad, when did you know you were straight? He put that one to rest, right? So again, gay, not gay, sick, not sick, drought, not drought, right? Or in a workshop Lori and I ran once where we were dealing with an app to help people not drive when they were drunk. And in the middle of the night, I had this realization, Galen, you might like this, or any other of us, sorry. But, I had this realization that alcohol blood level as an indicator of driving under the influence or not, that 0.1 or 0.08 or whatever, I think it's 0.08 in California, right? That 0.08 was actually permission granted by the state to drive drunk. because it leaves it up to us to go, well, I think I'm 0.06 or maybe I'm not, right? That law, the way it's constructed, says, it's okay to drink and drive, just don't drink and drive over 0.08. So again, the labels, the concepts, get in the way of what is so. Is like, I'm drinking, I shouldn't drive. Instead, it's like, well, I'm 0.05. I'm okay. Anybody had a 0.07999 friend go, I'm fine, give me my keys? Yeah, anybody been that person? So again, just some real life examples of this, what happens with language and words and concepts. So is there one that's not sick? From that place of this is just what is so, there's always one that's not sick. And that's a little tough to take in a way. There's always one that's not sick. This is just what is so right now. I'm so sick. Men on the call, I was talking about this koan with Tenshin Roshi a while back, and I was like, man, I've got the I'm sick down, Like I get a cold and I'm, it's just like big baby, whiny baby, like somebody take care of me, And I do think this lines up gender-wise often, women on the call. It's like, God, just get over it, But it's that definition again of I shouldn't be feeling this way. It shouldn't be this way. So it's a beautiful answer, actually. Yes, there is one that's not sick. And the monk is playing with it. He knows that that's supposed to be the answer from the absolute side of things, from the Zen thing. There's no sick, there's no well, there's no enlightened, there's no unenlightened. There's no empty, there's no full. And you can play these Zen games till the cows come home. But, what does it really mean? And so we go on with the koan. Does the one who is not sick look after you? Tozan replied, this old monk is able to look after others. Now, this also goes into the realm of parenting. If you're sick and your child becomes sick, what happens to your sickness? Or anybody in a relationship, you're sick and the person next to you all of a sudden is sick or sicker. What happens? You take care of them. I hope. So what happened to whiny little Dan? But if you turn and look to the one who is sick and start taking care, it's like magic, isn't it? It's kind of like magic. You just do it. Right, Sandra? Any of your daughters fall ill? All of a sudden, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Bill has a friend who's sick right now, and in caring for her, he's showing a tremendous amount of competence and wellness by showing up, by being there. And this is a beautiful thing, I think, about this practice. And I'm kind of wandering on this koan a little bit, but I think this is one of the beautiful things about this practice is when you get out of that whine and look to the other and really attend to the other. Who are you attending to? When you get out of that whine and look to the other and take care of the other, who is doing that? Where did the whiner the whinger, go. I always love that British word, whinging on, right? Where did that go? And so when we talk about the end of suffering and being the end of suffering, how difficult is it? We do it all the time. We just, we shape shift, we roll shift. We pull ourselves out of ourselves and look to the other, and all of a sudden we are the other. We're taking care of them. And who also feels better, at least for a little bit. Moms, sisters, when you're taking care of somebody else, who else are you taking care of? This one right here. And then this beautiful, how about when you look after others, then the having of sickness is not seen. The having of sickness is not seen. Julie and I were talking this morning about some work that she did in prisons. When you can really, really enter into that intimacy, then the having of otherness, the having of differentness, the having of sickness is not seen. It vanishes. It's a beautiful language, actually, in translation, but beautiful language. The having of sickness is not seen. It's not seen here and it's not seen there. It's just Scott. Interview is a little bit like that when done correctly. It's like as the teacher, there's really not a teacher there. There's not a student there. It's just there. And so the having of sickness or the having of problem or the having of wellness or the having of gayness, straightness, transgenderness is not seen. I'm old enough that there's still some stuckness in my ways, and I have a gay son and a gay son-in-law, and so gay is not really seen to me that much anymore, even with decades of conditioning that it was something to be seen. That T in LGBTQ, that's still a little bit of a catch for me. I'll just admit to it. I'm working on it. And we were in a movie the other night, and it's the Alamo Movie House in downtown Los Angeles. There's one in Austin, and you have a server and they bring food and stuff. And we had this server, and I think his name was Dan. I'm pretty sure it was Dan. But the server showed up pretty much in the form of a woman with somewhat of a man's voice, and said, "My name is Dan, and I'll be serving you tonight." And it was just like this beautiful human being. And I think it was one time where he looked at me and I looked at him, and we smiled, and the tea disappeared for me. That tea finally, for once, disappeared for me. And it felt really good. Tenshin Roshi talks about seeing people as beings. When somebody walks in the room, he doesn't see man, woman, black, white, straight, gay, whatever. He just sees a being. And I've taken that on because I think it's really good teaching. Because we're being right now. And we're being with each other. And if a being, it almost sounds science fiction at this point, but if the essence of being walks in and sits down in front of you and you are being at the same time, not noun now, but verb, you've got two beings occurring at the same time, then isn't that just one being? It's one occurrence. There's no T, there's no B, there's no Q, there's no L. There's no sick. The having of sickness is not seen. I wish I was looking at this koan prepping for this talk, and this, of course, is in the land of regrets, which in Zen we say is wasted energy, but hell, we're all human, right? But I wish I had spent this time with this koan, before my mother, fell down in the hall and died a few weeks ago. And we talked about this before, how I held her as sick. I held her in my mind and my heart as sick and needing healing, or the one who wants to suffer. Why does she want to suffer so much? And don't we do that with everybody around us, right, Melanie? Why can't they see it? I just want to fix them. This is so easy. I want to heal them. I'm a healer. But part of sickness in that sense is just us holding it that way. We make people sick in our own little heads. We make people transgender in our own little heads. In our little mind. Because big mind, that mind of realizing the true self, is just being. And two verbs being are just one verb being. I know. I think that's kind of cool. So, as we're dealing with those around us who are ill or sick or challenged or different than us, as we're dealing with ourselves, just a minute, Jill. As we're dealing with ourselves, just consider this. How about when one is taking care of others, the having of sickness is not seen? And that goes for right here also. I want to read in Shishin Wick's commentary. There's just a wonderful tale. This is again about Tozan of the illness. Take this as real historically or not. I don't really care. It's such a great story. I'm going to go with it. When Tozan was ready to die, he composed a poem for the assembly, shaved his head, sat erect, and died. Then everybody started crying and wailing so much that he opened his eyes and scolded them for not giving a dead man any peace. He roused himself and prepared a meal for them, which he called a stupidity meal. He extended his life for 7 more days, then bade them farewell again. He was frolicking in death and still had more to teach. It's just really, does it get any better than that, It's like, no, I won't be last on the bus to nirvana, you first, You prepare everything, you sit there, you die, and then everybody's going on and on. You're going wait a minute. This is stupid. I'm coming back to life. I've got more teaching to do, obviously, and prepare a stupidity meal. All right, I'll stop there and open things to questions. Julie raised her hand before you, Scott, and then we'll go there and see who else has got things. So you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. My question is, I ended up leaving for a little bit because my system went out. But when I got back, you were talking about the LGDTP and the T disappearing. My question is, in the big, that makes a lot of sense. But in the world we live in today, with all of the stuff going on, I've heard a lot of people come up to me when I've been walking around with one of my signs, and they've said, we're all the same.
Mhm.
Everybody's the same. Um, all lives matter. And my and I've had to talk to them about that. In the world we live in the here and now, in our Sunday, we're all here at Sunday, September 26th. Can we be doing that? I mean, shouldn't we focus on the little world, the world we live in? So it seems we have to fix that minor thing before we can let everything become the big. And I'm new to this. Your comments, please.
Beautiful. I knew Julie showing up was going to be fun. That's great. No, absolutely. And this is one of the seeming paradoxes or conundrums of Zen, okay? Because that experience for me of the tea disappearing actually allows me then to connect in a way so that I can deal with the fact that tea is persecuted or that tea is maligned or that tea does not have the rights, But it's coming from a place of connection and oneness and not a place of just thinking of something I should be doing because it lines up with my politics or should or could or wouldness. It comes from a very deep, powerful place. And when you're operating from your true self, from the center, that's where you want to attack the little world from, right? Because to successfully move some of these pieces in the little world, we have to be able to connect across the chasm of difference. And the chasm of difference is not bridged by I'm right, you're wrong. It has to be bridged from a much bigger place. So you source your social action, you source the action you need to take from that place of no tea, and then act in accordance. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, Scott? Here, we've got to do some muting and speakering.
Thank you.
Make sure people can hear you.
Okay. I always feel like, actually, in the last few talks that can people hear me?
Can you guys hear? Yes.
In the last few talks, Dan, that you've given, it's amazing. I just feel like you're like speaking to me based on what's relevant, like in my life today. It's amazing. So what I was gonna mention is that Dan and I just briefly caught up, and I told him that I got back from a retreat last night. What I didn't tell you was that it was an LGBT only retreat. And it was the first time that I had done that and didn't really know what to expect. There were about 100 people there. And one thing that was amazing for me, and I had never, I've hardly meditated with other people, mostly been doing it on my own or obviously via Zoom. And I've had only a few retreat experiences, but it was my first time doing it with an LGBT group. And what was somewhat amazing and very new to me is that of the LGBT group, I would say that by far the minority were gay men. And then I would think that the second largest minority were lesbian women. And by far the largest group there, probably over 50 people were trans people. And I had almost no, in my life, I've really had almost, even as a gay male, I've had no experience really with trans people. And it was one of those moments where throughout the course of the week, and one of the things that kind of realizes that, it's very easy, obviously, in meditation, especially silent meditation, to create these sicknesses within yourself, right? Oh, this hurts or that hurts, or only my problems are real problems, and it's so hard being a gay male. And then suddenly you're like, oh, these are not, I'm not the one who's sick. Or and not saying that they are sick, but it's suddenly it's like, well, as much as I feel that, I've been oppressed or marginalized, the truth is that I'm, a white gay male, and it's a whole lot different from the experience of like so many other people that I've basically been kind of blind to. So I just felt like it was just such a timely talk, and something that I just it really kind of hit home for me, just because it was also just so new to me, and I had that feeling of just, oh, like there are people sitting in this room right now with me who are like actively marginalized right now, and actively, have it a much more, more difficult time, and it just really puts things into perspective.
That's amazing. Great.
So thank you.
Swap the speakers around again. All right, you can hear me again. Thank you, Scott, and thanks for all your hard work. I mean, I hope that you all can see through my commentary over the months and weeks that there's, one bag of skin sitting here that is far from perfect, and I think the practice is really, for me, one of always working with that and using that as fuel. It's a little bit like returning to one when we're counting our breath, right? And some of you have heard me say the win is not in getting to 10 or whatever number. The win is in catching it. The win is in there it is again and returning to one. And, you can use that one now figuratively, returning to the one, returning to the one, and you can put that in Christian or Jewish or whatever context you want, but returning to the one, the true self, the true one, when you catch and drop all that baggage, all the LBs and Ts and, or sick or not sick, that's the win. And so, I've just shared from my own self, my constant journey, my commitment to my own practice and to all of you is try to stay awake enough to catch it. And when necessary, atone and apologize and correct. For me, I found that to be a great practice, and it brings this practice of Zen, 2,500 years old, and enlightenment and realization and emptiness and vastness. It just brings it home, Julie, so that I can attend to what needs to be taken care of in the purest fashion possible. Bill?
Yeah, I like what you're saying, and I see it in my own life. I see it slightly differently, the words slightly differently, and that is self-definition. And of course, and as you said, the T word comes up for you in certain ways, but it doesn't require that you apply a label for it to come up. Right. The labels are helpful, very helpful in one way, but the self-definition that comes out of that label, that's the thing about sickness and not sickness. It's also a self-definition. Mm-hmm. So my friend Joyce, who is quite sick, said to me yesterday, I don't think I'm sick. Mm-hmm. But then 5 minutes later, well, I won't say it, but she was racing to the bathroom. So there was a function going on there that was illness that could not be escaped. But there was a self-definition that was bigger than the illness. But when she came back, she was sick. When you're vomiting, you're sick. Yeah.
I think Bill just did that koan and the Dharma talk in, like 1/30th the time I did, so thank you. Joyce is 94 years old, and man, what a woman. She's an active sculptress, and we're hoping she pulls through this well. Her gastroenterologist, however you say that word, gastro person, doctor, came in and said, "Who's your cardiologist?" And she said, "I don't have one." And he said, "You're 94 years old and don't have a cardiologist?" Anyway, we wish her the very best. What a great woman. Jeff. Oh, and then Tamala and Melanie, I see you have your electronic hands up, so we'll get to you right away. Go ahead, Jeff.
First of all, great to see everybody. Really, really awesome talk, Dan. As usual, keep getting better. And I really appreciate, Scott, your kind of letting us into your world. That was really, really interesting. So I don't know if you noticed, but we were cracking up at one point during your talk, and it's where you said that Roshi, when he sees people come in, he just sees beings. And Christine thought you said
Beans.
Beans. All he sees are beans. Lima beans, pinto beans, black beans. We started cracking up, but it was also really funny too, because something, I don't know, sort of enlightening about that joke. All he sees are beans, because it sort of highlights the idea, well, there's different kinds of beings too, and beings, and I don't know, it's just it was kind of a perfect little storm of funny for us.
That is funny. It's my Southern California surfer slur, when you go to other parts of the country and they're like, "What's that accent?" And you go, "I don't have an accent. You're the one that's talking funny." But see, there it is again, right?
Right.
There it is again. Yeah. Beans. I'll try to enunciate more clearly.
No, or just say beans. I think it's funny.
Not worth a hill of beans. Melanie. Was that it, Jeff? And Christine?
Yeah, pretty much. I just really appreciate, we're kind of dealing with a lot of sickness in our family. Christine's sister's going through some chemo stuff, and my dad and my brother-in-law, who's actually I think considerably better, and just stuff going around. There's a guy in our complex who's got schizophrenia and is having some issues, and just seeing a lot of that side of things, the sickness. And so it's great to really get connected to the compassion and the unity behind all of that. And I think your talk really points to that, and so that's very helpful for us. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Don't waste any time on this one, folks, because otherwise you end up like me, having to reach back across time, with my mother and work with her in another plane. It would have been nice to have been able to do some of that work, in the flesh. The work's still being done, but don't waste time on this. Yeah. Melanie.
Thank you for this talk, Shiro. And Jeff, thanks for bringing the beans into it. When I was dating this guy once, he would read to me often, and one of his jokes was that he would just say something about beans in whatever passage he was reading, just to see if I was really listening to what he was reading. So thank you for bringing the beans up. So this is a great talk, because I am sick, and then I'm not sick, and then I am sick and I'm not sick. And my brother and his wife and his kids all had COVID a couple of weeks ago in Texas. And so just feeling all those feelings around that. And my mom on the screen, I worry about her health because she's my mom, and my mom is healthy and beautiful and not sick and then sick and then not sick and then sick. And I also thank you, Julia, for bringing up what you brought up, because I had my moment once when I was reading that book by Glennon Doyle called Untamed, and she talked about her experience of being gay, and that she identified as just being, and then being in love with a woman, but not identifying as gay. And I was talking about this with two of my bisexual friends, and they said to me, it would be nice if we could all just be beings. But for both of their experiences, they needed to go in March, and they needed to have that identity as being queer. And they needed to be seen as that and acknowledged and appreciated for how they experience life differently than a cis person. And so I had a moment of like, okay, I don't want to be bypassing someone else's experience and their need to identify as something, to be honored, their life experience to be honored. So it almost seems like there's a whole process inside of self in terms of identifying as sick or identifying as the healer of self that's not sick, and also sexuality. Like there's in our own personal sexuality to identify as all those different things, to see what other people are going through before we can really say we're all just beings. You know, it just seems like there's a life experience that has to occur before stepping into something else, which could seem condescending in a way. Does that make sense? So that's just what I wanted to share. And my heart is beating very fast. And I'm feeling a lot. And I love you guys.
Love you too, Melanie. And you know, the tinnitus or tinnitus, depending on which way you say it, is, I know, one of the things you're dealing with, and I can hear my left ear ringing right now. You know, it's a funny little exercise. Now, you may have it much, sounds like you've got it much worse than I do, but it is a funny thing how it's always there, but not always there. You know, and that's kind of the sick, not sick thing, you know. And
What I'm experiencing is fluid in the brain.
yeah.
So when I have drainage, it's quieter. But when there's more fluid in my brain, it's like really loud. So I'm just regulating fluids right now, literally.
Is that a Zen teaching?
Yeah.
Thank you, Melanie. And please take care of yourself, okay? And reach out, okay?
Yeah.
Tamala.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you so much for this talk today, and thank you to everyone who's shared so far. I'm glad I came today because this talk touches on two really big kind of items in our lives. So tomorrow, my husband is going to be going in for surgery to have 2 of his discs in his neck replaced. And he's been having, you know, lots of pain in his neck, and he has 3 discs that need to be replaced, 2 in his neck and 1 in his back. And he's had a lot of pain. And this idea of sick and not sick and ill and not ill, it's one we've been struggling with, you know, throughout the past months, because in those moments where he's having a lot of pain, that's all there is the pain, right? It's hard for him to think about anything else. And it's hard for me as his partner to see him in so much pain and wanting to make it go away, you know. And then tomorrow morning he has a surgery, and even though he's in pain, the surgery is going to be kind of like a light switch where he's in pain, but he's still, basically can take care of himself, and he's working and all that. But tomorrow he has surgery, and after that he's going to be bedridden for probably a few days at least, and on heavy medication and all that. So the talk today just gave me some to think about, that while we're in the midst of all that deep caretaking and that we're attending to his sickness, he is not the sickness. I mean, the sickness is what we're taking care of, but that's not him.
Yeah.
Who he is. So I think, to me, when I had a little bit of struggle when you first started the talk, but as you were speaking, it kind of resolved a little bit for me. And I think that part of it is that at first I felt like if we don't acknowledge the sickness, we're not acknowledging what is. We're not acknowledging and being aware of what is. And it almost felt a little bit like, well, let's pretend like it's not happening. But I know that's not what you were saying. That's how it felt at first. And then I thought, well, what about, is it possible to not be the sickness, and also at the same time be fully aware that the sickness exists?
Yeah.
So that kind of duality of both awarenesses at the same time. And that too, I think part of it for me anyway is judging. And as soon as you start to attach judgment to the sickness, that's when it starts to get complicated for me. And to try to release that judgment and to say simply that it is there, it is what we're dealing with, but it's not a value of who he is, or change who he is, or describes who he is. It's just one of those life things we have to deal with. So that's kind of what I was thinking about during your talk. And it also touches on we were talking about transgender earlier, and my youngest is transgender, and I have 2 non-binary children, and my husband and I are non-binary. So where, that is an issue for us that we are grappling with right now. So it was interesting that those 2 things were the topics that you brought up today for us. So thank you for giving us some perspective on that.
Well, and thank you for your commentary, and also pointing out some of the shortcomings of language around all of this, because, obviously if somebody is in pain, they're in pain. If they're dying, they're dying. If I have mental health issues, I have mental health issues, right? And that is what is. But as you rightly said, it's the attachment to those descriptions, or as Bill said, the self-definition by those descriptions, or the judgment around them, prejudice around them, prejudging based on a label. That's where the trouble comes in. And that's where being able to reach into the empty space and transcend the words and the descriptions and the concepts really helps, and I really had not thought about being as a verb versus being as a noun, until this talk. In fact, I'm pretty certain this talk was the koan had nothing to do with LGBTQ issues, when the recording of history. Sometimes we dive into these topics and you never know what's going to appear. So I'm glad that it seemed to be okay. But I lost my train of thought. Anyway, thank you for your commentary. Zen is not about, glossing over and just like, oh, everything's okay and I don't need to take any action, as Julia pointed out earlier, right? I see it more as, where are you operating from? Do you know who is seeing through these eyes, hearing through these ears? Do you know your true self? Can you act in accordance with that true self, authentically and cleanly and purely? So... I got another bill here.
This is very short.
Yeah.
Because I've already had my time. Language is so important because it programs us as to how we think we should be. I had a close friend who was a Zen practitioner and ended up living at the Zen Center during hospice and died after it was over. And he always spoke of his cancer that he had. He would say, this body. He wouldn't say, I have cancer. He would say, this body has cancer. And I think I knew as well as he did that at one level he had cancer. At another level, he wasn't defining himself as cancer. And it was just that small thing of language. This body isn't working right. This brain isn't working right.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, because when we go to the true self, the original face, the one, all the language around it, it really puts us in a different place. Julie and I, having known each other for 39 years, but we probably haven't seen each other face to face in 35 of those years, something I'm guessing. When you meet somebody and when you're with somebody and you haven't seen them for a while and you're like, wow, it says no time passed. That's because the true selves are connecting. Not the bag of skins, not the body with cancer or without cancer, not the story, but it's actually just that being, those two beings are being together, and that being as one verb, being together, is beautiful. And there is no time in that. No time did pass in that. Right, Julie? I mean, we both look quite a bit different than back then, Well, you look fabulous. But,
Good as you ever were.
Yeah, but it's that connection that defies time. Because whether the body has cancer or the body does not have cancer, whether the body has a fever or wrinkles or not, isn't it true? Haven't you always been there? Go a while not looking at a mirror. An interesting exercise. Just don't look at yourself. It's hard to do if you're driving, I know. But if you don't see yourself physically, isn't that one, the same one? Through all the time and all the wrinkles and all the illness and all the wellness and all the love and all the heartbreak and all, we go on and on through all of your human experience. That one is forever. Okay, Lori. It's 11:03. If people need to pop off, I understand. Of course, we understand. But as long as there are questions, we'll keep going.
But before you go, I just want to acknowledge everybody for their agility. I mean, it's really so easy to get hooked and to get caught up in, being your illness or being your feeling or being your judgment, and just forget that those pieces are, lodged in you somewhere. But when, we're living in a time that's very moving fast forward, really fast forward. We're expanding our consciousness so quickly. There's so much pressure in our lives, and it's such an incredible time. And I think that all the stories I've heard today are about the personal agility that we're all experiencing. And I just want you to really take that in and own that.
What Lori's talking about is a very high level of skill and competence, Bill. Very high level of skill and competence at being human beings that you all are expressing. Welcome, Nora. Good to see you.
I'm so sorry, but I just got
Tamla, I'm glad you came back this week after my rant about Dusashins, more Zen.
No, you don't know how profound it was meant to.
And on the Sesshin front, please do save your space if you can. Nora, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I'm saying I'm sorry that it's my first time, and I'm sorry I'm so late, but even these few minutes have been so profound. I was communicating with my brother in London on this topic that, we inevitably were neglected by our parents who kept losing infants. So they didn't have enough to be there for us. And we're stuck. We have been stuck. But he's even more stuck as the first son because of the culture and all that. But in a nutshell, that was what I was trying to communicate with you. And it brings me to tears that you kind of affirmed what I was intuitively telling him, that we are beyond how and what they treated us or didn't treat us or saw us or couldn't see us, that we are beyond that. And you just gave that to me, and it's really touching. It was meant to be. Thank you. Thank you for providing this. Thank you.
And thank you, Nora, and thank you for joining and being a teacher in return. And you're always welcome, okay?
Thank you.